introduce Marshall. Marshall Pecore received a Bachelor's of Science in Forest Management from Michigan Tech University. He's been the forest manager for Menominee Tribal Enterprises since 1975 and has served on numerous state committees on forestry issues over the years. He is married, has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. So welcome, Marshall Pecore.
Good afternoon. There's more faces out there than I thought there would be, since I'm the last cleanup hitter here for the group, or the whole conference rather. But probably a little bit different. My talk is going to be more on management and how we manage in the lake states, and why our forest, our Menominee forest, is healthy and resilient. So maybe give you a little history on that, which ties back into our collaboration with other stakeholders. If you're not familiar, is that me? Well, should I shut it off? There we go. Anyway, what's different about Menominee is we have a national forest that abuts a portion of our forest on the northern edge of it, but it's a northern hardwood forest. Right now, back home, there's flood watches. There was flood watches earlier. 2 years ago, we had the deepest snow that we've ever had before, so we get a lot of water, basically, but fire danger is lower. That doesn't mean to say we don't have problems, that we don't adjoin and have the same problems with our neighbors. A lot of our neighbors are private, non-industrial forest landowners and state lands. So our approach to collaboration and to spread the gospel, if you may, about forestry, which is needed, which is what I want to talk about, is a different approach than maybe what a lot of you have been trying, especially that abut a lot of national forests. You know, you have the TFA program and other tasks that you want to do to reduce fire risk. We don't have that type of problem. We got a different problem. And we got different neighbors many a times that we have to try to work with and get a different understanding. But anyway, if I may, I'll take a few minutes and kind of go over a little bit of our history. Some of you may be familiar with some of it, some may not. But it's a pretty amazing history as far as management. And fortunately, as many of you, but especially myself, are working with the gifts and knowledge of a few guys, especially 100 years ago, that made super decisions on Menominee. And I think set a course that makes Menominee really unique. But anyway, with that, maybe we'll go over, some of this is a little bit what Gary was talking about earlier, that you'll see the crossover. And maybe some of the answers that Gary was proposing are in our history. And we'll talk a little bit about collaboration on the management end of it, on what we're trying to do. It's no doubt that the forest that is healthy and resilient would be sustainable. To be sustainable is the goal of a growing list of human activities that place demands on the environment, agriculture, fisheries, energy, production, economic development, and certainly not least forestry. The notion of sustainability is attractive because it seems to offer a middle ground between choosing extremes. Earlier in this century, in part to the destructive practices of the timber barons, American foresters developed sustained timber yield principles based on the scientific forestry first developed in Europe. For decades, these principles have been the core of forestry education and silviculture practices around the world. There are new debates on forestry sustainability fueled by more sophisticated and ecological social research and by widespread evidence of the negative environmental facts of logging in a natural forest. The most damaging evidence against current forestry practices come from areas where sustained timber yield principles have not been seriously applied. The problem with many of the world's forests is not forestry, but the lack of long-term forestry practices being used. In a world of climate change, ozone depletion, human population growth, pestilence, biodiversity is likely to be key to sustainability, including the human species. A landscape with great diversity and species is more adaptable to change than monocultures. It is sustainability that depends on biodiversity, not the other way around. Forest management policies must be based on the best current knowledge and be flexible enough to respond quickly to new information. This is the adaptive management, which is simply learning from your experience. The trick is not to be over-responsive to each new bit of information. This type of management would cause management changing direction on the basis of every new study. This approach that has been used on the Menominee is a blend of research and monitoring. Alternative management options are tested as experiments. Waiting for all the answers is impractical, but when new research and data are tested and proven, we adapt. This is the adaptive management approach that long-term sustained yield forestry practices have used. Because of our global markets and our environments, forest policy choices are complex. What other people do not do or do in their forests affects the economic well-being and the environmental quality and biological diversity of our forest. As we know, all things are connected. Sustaining desired ecosystem conditions requires that management goals and actions require an interdisciplinary understanding of balancing out the goals of economics, social, and ecological. Sustainable forestry is more than saving old-growth forests, timber industry jobs, spotted owls, roadless areas, endangered species, or even biodiversity. These may be important factors, but they may be a diversion from the real challenge because they focus our attention on still too narrow of a goal. To manage forests, to sustain maximum output of timber or maximum output of owls, the fact that one addresses the maximum economic goal in spotted owl is not correct. Neither addresses the balance of the three pillars of sustainability. Three pillars of sustainability that we have been talking about. The ecosystem challenge is to sustain the desired condition, uses, and values in the context of a global market and environments, and to sustain to the local regional fairness in meeting human and social needs. Here's some stationery that is currently used on Menominee Tribal Enterprises stationery. This dates back to 1936 that we've been using this. But what's important about it, why a lot of people come to Menominee, is notice the three circles. This is before the diagrams have all been developed. They're talking about economics, they're talking about social. when we're talking about the resource. They understood the concept a long time ago, as we all know from Indian country. But somehow these people put it forward before it was even thought about on letterhead. Debates over sustainability of forests and other natural resources are often flavored with overtones of despair and imminent catastrophe. Debates are healthy, but should be based on facts and options. Furthermore, before people decide where they want to go, they might consider where they have come from, where they are, and how they got there. There is overwhelming evidence that on balancing sustainability, conservation, and multi-use, that long-term sustained yield policies have worked well and has served Menominee well. The current resource situation at Menominee offers a much broader range of choices than would have existed in long-term policy of sustained yield not been applied. On the 234,000 acres of total forest, 220,000 is forested. Of the 16 forest cover types that exist in the Lake States, we have 14. That isn't just by luck. It has to do with management, and that has to do with philosophy and outlook. That's why we get a lot of people to Menominee. That's how we collaborate with many of our neighbors, telling that story. So our collaboration and stuff is different than what we've been talking to some degree, but it's still telling the story about Indian country. So even though we're coming from the other side of the Mississippi, maybe our problems are different, but the need is the same. As we consider changes for the future, the historical dimension should not be forgotten. The 160-year history of the forest resource use and management on the Menominee Forest stands as a practical example of sustainable forestry. Forestry that is ecologically viable, economically feasible, and socially desirable. This refers not only to the forest products and social benefits, but also to wildlife, site productivity, and other ecosystem functions. Sustained yield management, as traditionally and currently practiced on the Menominee, well, it's not that, the pictures aren't that critical, they're just something to look at while that comes anyway. As we consider the change for the future, the historical dimension should not be forgotten. The 160-year history of the forest resource use and management on the Menominee Forest stands as a practical example of sustainable forestry. Again, forestry that is ecologically viable, economically feasible, and socially desirable. Sustained yield management, as traditionally and currently practiced on the Menominee, predates the concepts currently involving in discussion amongst resource managers. The Menominee tribe has learned from previous generations the function of a forest ecosystem and all the effects that one component can have on another. It is understood that the whole resource is needed to protect a part. The tribe's survival depends on managing and protecting the forest ecosystem. The tribe's land ethic and management philosophy has always contained the three components of sustainable systems: first, it must be sustainable for future generations. Chief Oshkosh, our early tribal leader, articulated the tribe's idea of cutting across the reservation at such a rate that there would be always timber ready to be cut, defines its accomplishment. Start with the rising sun and work towards the setting sun, but take only the mature trees, the sick trees, the trees that have fallen. When you reach the end of the reservation, turn and cut to the setting sun, to the rising sun, and the trees will last forever. That's a sustainable system. Not only did he tell us how, but he told us when to do it. Second, the forest must be cared for properly to provide for the needs of people. Management must conserve the productive capacity of the land. Anyway, the management must conserve the productive capacity of the land to produce forest products in order to sustain the tribe's economy. Third, maintain the forest diversity. These concepts generally form the foundation of the current ecosystem management theories. The tribe has found managing the forest for the long-term quality and quantity of saw timber while maintaining the diversity of native species has resulted in a forest that is healthy, productive, and diverse. Individual stands are very complex structurally, containing seedlings and saplings and saw timber trees, as well as dead material in various stages of decomposition. As diverse forests allows for diverse functions of wildlife, invertebrates, and fisheries, by allowing the forest to maintain diversity, the forest itself maintains adaptability. This minimizes the social and ecological effects of an unpredictable future. The abundance of non-timber resources and the quality of the environment are evidence that the three components of sustainable systems are being satisfied. Yet management of these ecosystems is profoundly complex. Refinements to management will be made as more information is available. Again, what happens on Menominee is because we talk management to a lot of different people, a lot of different groups, we share a lot of different things. This red-shouldered hawk, which is threatened in the lake states. We had some ornithologists and hawk people up, and we got them all over the place. Anyway, we were sharing ideas on management of the biologists got off the calls and all the rest of it, and the birds were hollering back and swooping down on the truck and all the rest of it. And I swear those guys were going to have an orgasm. So excited. Anyway. What was funny is then after they got all excited and all the rest of it, and Rope guys myself were watching them get excited, and he said, "God, Pecore, now we got to tell you how to manage for these things." Just before that, we had another group come on a tour. They were professors from the University of Madison, about a week before that group, in fact. And we were talking about monocultures and management, regeneration efforts. And one guy there, oh, this is wonderful to be on these big trees and see what the lake states used to look like, and all the rest of it is just going on and on. Well, I'm sure I'm glad you guys didn't cut your trees down. What he said, what was so funny about that was when he was telling his story and telling us, he was sitting on the stump. Yeah. Almost 60 years ago, Alva Leopold, in the Land Ethic, discussed the ideological splitting of resource management actions across this nation. And he said, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the biotic community. Fortunately, on Menominee, these ideological beliefs have been in place for generations. Bob Deere, a tribal member and ex-MTE president, states this belief, I believe, very well. The oral Indian traditions and Leopold's writings share a common concern for the earth. Through them, both Native Americans and the professor affirm a common vision of the natural world and its uncommon spirit. This collective creativity never died and is with us in the Indian spirit world. Another source of balance in the factors of sustainability on Menominee was done by Fighting Bob La Follette when he addressed the U.S. Congress in 1900 to allow the Menominees to cut 20 million board feet of timber and allowing the Menominees to use their own funds to build a sawmill. And he addressed Congress by saying, the forest is the natural home of these men. They are what are known as timber Indians. Their every instinct teaches them to seek a livelihood from within the forest. The care, the preservation of these forests should be of the Indian's interest and his work. What the white man has in other places destroyed, the Indians should do to preserve. This does not mean that the forest shall be permitted to remain in its wild state and contribute nothing of economic value to our country. It does mean that the harvest of the forest perpetuate itself. Some of the things over the years, like I say, our collaboration with people is more to do with management and some of the things that we have done differently. We're talking about the mill and Neopit. When Neopit was built and the mill was first built, they collaborated with the Forest Service. The guys that assisted the tribe, and wasn't the Department of War who was over Menominees at that time. It was the Forest Service, the engineers. There was 3 young engineers primarily that laid out the mill, laid out the villages, the design of the villages to be self-sufficient. And if that wasn't collaboration, many Menominee leaders feel that they did it so well and made it so self-sufficient and profitable that led to the tribe being terminated because of their success. So that's, again, a belief. But it was collaboration. Another time, shortly after the Forest Service creation, was railroad logging was out there, but trucks were starting to come into the picture, log trucks. Menominees thought, hey, there's got to be a better way to cut timber than to go from the railroad tracks and cut it all the way, clear cut it, and abandon it. So they worked with the Forest Service to develop single tree selection. Some of the first single tree selection cuts that were done between the Menominee and the Forest Service in ways to do single tree selection. That was pretty major. A lot of research and a lot of different things, especially in silviculture and management and inventory, were done in collaboration with other people because of that history. So our collaboration efforts are different than a little bit than what we're talking about here. but it's still the same thing. Telling other people the story and telling other people our needs and working together. And as we tell the story, new ideas come forward and hopefully better management. And I think looking at our history, I think it has promoted a resilient forest and a forest that many other forests are trying to emulate. And if Menominee can do it with all of its adversity that people bestowed on them, that they had to fight against, I think we definitely in this era can go forward with a much better management system than what we came from in the past. But there are a number of other things. We do a lot of work with the DNR. We do a lot of work with the Woodlands Association, which is private, the Woodlands Association of Wisconsin, on management, showcasing, talking about different things, talking about training programs, workforce development. Some are more successful than others, but I think this collaboration is important. As I mentioned earlier, one of the problems we still face, though, is that history and explaining that history, and probably need some help in articulating. You know, a lot of people don't want to go bust those Indians. You know, well, they either want something back, or geez, I don't want to do it because I don't like talking about the history. I know a little bit about what the U.S. did to them. I don't want to go over there and talk to them about that. So they end up being impediments to things that we're not looking for. We're just looking for development of better ideas and research. So, a little different approach. If I went divergent of what you thought, sorry about that, but we are a little different over there. Thank you.